this class, like I said, is about winning writing offer strategies. What you need to know is what are all the different, I call them what are all the tools in my toolkit that I can counsel a buyer on that they could use, that we could use in writing a winning offer. And really, it's going to start with you really understanding what your buyers are willing to do and financially able to do. And that should not be information that you start gathering at the time you find a house and they say, I want to write an offer. And then you start throwing these different strategies at them. And they're going to be like, I don't know. They need, because you're going to have different personality types. You're going to have some people. Well, let me ask you a question. How many of you need to chew on information before you make big decisions? How many of you are willing to move fast? Amy's like, my husband is with you.
We are fast decision makers.
I am, but I'm going to have information to digest and chew on. I can chew really quickly. I can have a sense of urgency, but I am not comfortable moving forward without facts, without information. And so that's really important. And if you don't know that about your clients and you get to the heat of the moment and you have found them their dream home and you haven't talked strategies and understood their risk tolerance, every buyer and every seller has limits to their risk tolerance. Some is just them. They're not risk takers. Some is financially they can't. So it's going to be very, very important that you have these conversations. So that's why, when we were talking about the buyer consultation, it's actually ongoing. Throughout this whole time that you spend with them is you should be, I think we're getting everybody on, okay. You should be having these conversations because it's very hard to try to cover all of this in one appointment. Like you talk to them about the process. You talk to them about all of those things in that buyer consultation. And then you start talking winning strategies with them. What do you think their heads are going to do? Explode. And so you have to be able to say to them, there is a lot to buying a house. And there are times when we're going to have different conversations. And the sooner we have some of these conversations, the better. Does that make sense? So I don't want you to think the buyer's consultation, here's where I always struggled. And I don't know about any of you, if you've done buyer's consultations and if you had the same struggle as I did, but I would just vomit information all over them. Because I felt desperate to get all the information in front of them. When really what I needed to do, it's kind of like what we do to you guys. Do you feel like we vomit information on you? We do. We do. I feel like we do.
We do.
But really our objective is to at least get base underneath you. I know you're not going to master all of this the first time you hear it. It's just not going to happen. I mean, some of you may be brilliant and you can do that. I'm not that person personally. I wish I was, but I'm not. I have to absorb it. I have to hear it. I have to learn it. I have to do it. It's all of that. So we're doing the same thing to you. We're putting base underneath you with a lot of information, hoping some of it sticks. Think of it the same way with your clients. You're going to share a lot of information with them, but you're going to have to revisit that information because you hear me repeat things, right? I do. And there's a reason is because I'm not assuming any of you remember all of it. And that's okay. That's the process of learning, especially when you're stepping into something you haven't done before. And same with your clients, think the same way. It's not a one and done of sharing the process or the information. And that's why you've got to think about, you all should be thinking, as we've gone through all of these things about buyers in the last couple of weeks, you should be thinking, what is my process with a buyer going to look like? What's step one? What's step two? You can follow my steps to working with a buyer. Or you can, that's not written in stone. Those are just some best practices. But when would you have this conversation? Because let me tell you, the conversation in a buyer's market would be different than it is right now. You wouldn't have to be talking about an escalatory clause, most likely. You wouldn't have to be talking about an appraisal waiver, right? But you as an agent need to know all those different strategies so that you always have the tools in the tool belt to pull out when you need to, depending on the house or the market. So we're going to talk about mastering competitive offers. And this won't be everything. I can't exhaust all the different strategies. I'm just going to go over some of the main strategies with you so that you can start knowing what that is. So we're going to understand and apply different key offer strategies to increase a buyer's success. We're going to look at what makes an offer stand out in a multiple offer situation. And we're going to also talk about balancing strong offers with ethical and legal considerations, because we want to be legal. And help you see how to confidently guide your buyers through the offer negotiations, because it's very stressful. It's stressful for you, especially when you're new, but I don't think that stress ever goes away. I never felt like, oh, no big deal, we're just writing an offer and submitting it. I would, there's pressure on you too, and then think about your clients. Will I win this house? Whereas in a buyer's market, it's not, will I win this house so much? It's, will I get the terms that I want for this house? Whereas in this market is winning and getting hopefully decent terms, hopefully, to win that house. So again, that's what we just went over, what the class objectives are. Why does a strong offer? Why does that even matter? Well, you've got to be a strategic thinker as of what's going to appeal. Simply submitting an offer isn't enough. Every house and every situation, that's why you're going to want to talk with the listing agent if at all possible. You should never, ever sit down to write an offer without talking to the listing agent, ever. Now, I'm a realist. I know sometimes that will happen. Some agents will, listing agents won't get back to you. However, you should make every effort to have that conversation. Okay. One of the ways you can do that is by being a good agent when you're showing that house or making an appointment. I did this both ways. If I was a listing agent and you, Jody, made an appointment for my house, yeah, I know you did it through the service, the scheduling service, but I'd always say, Jody, I'm so excited that you're taking a buyer to see my house at 123 Main Street. When you go to see that house, and I pick out one outstanding feature, sometimes you have to kind of think really hard to figure out what that feature is. And I would say, I hope we get to work together. And if I am a buyer's agent and I know this is a hot house, I can tell it's a cream puff. I know this is going to pop. I'm going to be saying to that listing agent in a text message, hey, going to go see your house at 123 Main Street. Is there anything we need to know before I take my buyers? They're very excited to see it, and I hope we get to work together. That makes me stand out. So I've got to stand out as an agent And then I've got to write an offer that stands out if my buyers can do that. So in a competitive market, it's got to be well structured, and you've got to know the different strategies. When we say well structured, can I tell you, you know it is required that Linda looks over every contract document, not just the sales contract, but everything, every document that you're going to be sending to your client to sign, Linda has to see. And so that when you submit an offer to a listing agent, it should be wrapped up in a little bow, meaning everything should be there. You're going to think it's kind of crazy, but it's so true that many agents submit offers that are not complete. And you're like, how can that be? Happens every day. They get in a hurry or they don't really know what they're doing. I think I've mentioned my husband's right now, he's got a listing under contract, and that agent, I almost can, and I'm not a betting woman, but some things are sure bets. And I am almost positive that this is not this buyer's agent first offer. It is like a second, because he has no clue what he's doing. None. I'm just like, well, if he's at Platinum, there's not training, it's not design, that's not their thing. And so it shows. And you don't ever want that to show. And here's how. You don't want a listing agent to know you're new just because of how your offer looks. Can I tell you, Linda and I can look at an offer pretty much 80–90% of the time and go, oh, poor little new thing. Poor little new thing. That's how I looked at Mike's offer on his listing. I was like, oh, new. Didn't have so much was wrong or missing. Didn't even know he needed to do an inspection notice. I sent over the resolution. He just sent over the inspection report.
Your exit, please.
Didn't know. So that's where the highest and best compliment we can get as coaches is when you come back to us and say, hey, the listing agent said my offer was the only one that was complete. Or they say, we went under contract and they had no idea I was new. I don't want a big N on your forehead that precedes you saying, oh, she's new. It shouldn't. There should be no obvious signs when you're doing that. So buyers and offers different from sellers' negotiations, because think about it. They have different priorities, don't they? What does a buyer want? They want affordability. They're focused on financing and contingencies. So how much can I buy it for, and what kind of things can I ask the seller for? Right? That's really important to them. And what's the most affordable or best loan for me? Well, the sellers want certainty, timing, and what's my bottom line? What am I going to get at the end of the day at closing? What am I going to make? Make sense? And if you're a good listing agent, certainty is going to be one of the priorities that you're going to help that seller understand. Because not every buyer or every buyer's agent will make it to the closing table. So one of the things to understand on the listing side that they're looking at is a good listing agent will be explaining to a seller that the highest offer is not always the best offer. There are so many other factors that we must consider, because some agents and buyers are going to come in high and they might not be able to do that just to win. So so we're gonna look at different things. So while we're looking at these strategies, keep that in the back of your mind of what is important to sellers. As remember, what you're trying to do is not only craft the best offer for your buyer, but one that would get a seller's attention. And timing is also equally important. Sometimes when a buyer can close will be more important than a higher price offer that they can't close in the timeline that the sellers really need. That just happened to my husband on his listing. 2 offers, and one they could close like in 30 days. And the other one was not until the end of April. Otherwise, very similar offers. Well, the seller has already moved. So I don't want these holding costs of this house. So sooner is better for me. Right? So the stronger offer balances the buyer's needs with, it should show, the seller's motivations. So that's why we say it really needs to be a win-win. And I never say it's, I can't, with all me being the realist, I can't tell you it's 100% win-win. I like to describe as being the realist I am, is that it should be a deal that both sides feel pretty darn good about. Because the one thing I didn't understand in real estate coming back from a law background is I came from an adversarial background. Somebody wins, somebody loses. And so I came into real estate thinking, win. Then I realized, oh, that didn't work so well because when you're negotiating an offer, a seller can go tell you to go take a flying leap. They don't have to engage with you if it doesn't look favorable to them. And that's something I will tell you in your buyers, in your conversations and discussions with your buyers, you have to set those expectations, because if you don't, what can happen, and it happened to me and I was shocked. A buyer said to me, I think you're siding with the seller. When I was saying, well, the seller's considerations are these. When we were negotiating an offer, I was shocked. I was just giving the seller's perspective and what we were up against. But my buyer felt like I was not on their side because they wanted to like get everything. I didn't set healthy expectations with that buyer that we may not get everything, and this is not a win-lose scenario. So I didn't educate them and set expectations well enough. And that was an important learning. So I want to ask you all, what is some of the strategies? I kind of want to get an idea of what you're aware of now. What are some of the most competitive offer strategies you've heard about? Share with me. Cash offer. Yep. Cash offers can be, we used to say cash offers are king. It's not necessarily right now, but they usually do have the edge. But it used to be, here's where it's different. Used to be a cash offer could come in a little lower because they had no contingencies, especially if they waived inspections or waived the right to cancel even if they could do inspections. So it used to be that normally a cash offer could come in a little bit lower than everybody else and still win. And they could usually close in a tighter window. What do you think the fastest a cash offer can go through the process, the system, and close? What do you think is the fastest on average?
2 weeks. A week to 2 weeks.
5 days? 2 weeks? 10 days? Who said 10? 10 days. So title company, and to do the closing, it takes them about 10 days. So again, when you're writing an offer and you didn't know that as a new person, you put in 5 days, or 6 days or whatever, you've got to know that the process probably can't meet that expectation. And your earnest money has to be wired. It cannot ever be a check because it won't clear in less than 10 days and cure in the bank. Okay. Thank goodness we have mostly wires. What are some others? Cash? What other strategies have you heard people doing in an offer to win?
Like waiving the inspection.
Waiving the inspection, doing the as is. And if you're not familiar with the as is addendum, you need to be. You need to know what 1, 2, and 3, because they're different options and levels of accepting it as is. There's a complete as is. That's number 3.
Is that when they say like check box 1, 2, 3? Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Not good.
check.
Okay.
Well, it's risky. It's high risk.
Whereas box 1 is.
It's not too bad because you can do inspections and you can back out, but you cannot try to renegotiate.
Based.
Right, right. You can either accept or walk. 2 is, I get to do inspections, but I'll take it no matter what the outcome of the inspections are. Number 3 are, I will do no inspections and I'm just taking it as is, as my eyeball sees it. High risk, but remember what I said about a buyer's risk tolerance. If you have anyone doing as addendums, know that in .loop, in our templates, there's an inspection. What's the title of it? Inspection. Yeah, inspection notice. You should always, I would make it a best practice. It's not a required form, but it is you telling a buyer all the types of the inspections they could or should do.
That's the inspection.
You would share that.
Inspection advisory.
You would share that like in your.
I would have that part of
As
what,
part of your buyer's agency and all of that,
Yeah.
all of those docs.
That's one of the ones I recommend you have the buyer.
it wouldn't go with an offer, it would be an internal doc, but it would cover your,
That's one of the ones we use for our buyer agency documents.
yeah.
That introduces your buyer to the whole concept of inspections and helps them understand what their options are.
Again, anything you can do to document what you've shared with them, to have them be making educated and knowledgeable decisions,
And
less inspection advisory.
Thank you.
Like I said, it is not required, but I would make it a best practice. It would be a required doc for me.
It's my mind, I'll do it every time.
Yeah. You have nothing to lose in having them always sign that.
For the brand new buyer that has never done or been experienced a home inspection, it does explain to them what the process is.
Yeah.
So it's very helpful.
What are some of the others? Any other strategies you've heard of?
The appraisal waiver.
Appraisal waiver. So know that in a paragraph or 2 in the contract you need to be aware of what are all the contingencies for a buyer in the contract. We've already talked about one of them. What is one of them? Amy, you said it. Inspections. That's a contingency, meaning a contingency means the buyer could cancel this contract tied to this contingency. So they can cancel under the inspections. They can cancel contingency on appraisal. So on an appraisal waiver, and we'll get into it, there's a little bit more that you need to know about. Because there's still some things that they need to be aware of. Anything else that you've heard of? Because those are some of the things we're gonna cover. So a contingency on that it is a contingent offer. That's another form that if you are not familiar with, you should look at. Right now, contingent buyers still have a really hard time, but since we do have some properties that are staying on the market longer, if I was you and I go into MLS on a daily basis, I would be tracking that graph. It used to be at the top of the page. I don't like where they placed it now. But it tells you how many new listings, how many went under contract, how many show for backups, how many expired, how many contingents. If I see that number ticking up, it tells me there are more sellers willing to take contingent offers because we're experiencing a little bit more days on market. So that graph there, actually, if you set it, I set it at a 7-day window. I think it's usually defaults to a 3-day, I'm not sure. But on that graph, I set it for a 7-day window so I can actually see trends happening. I can start seeing, oh, we're getting more, our inventory coming on the market's going up. Oh, we have fewer under contract. Oh, so I'm looking at that because it's telling more expireds. That tells me more expireds mean listings aren't selling as fast as they were. Because we went to a point of almost expired listings being almost non-existent. And now they're starting to creep up as days on market creep up. So
Is it called market? Define it.
it's on the dashboard and it's the graph and it's on that half. It's about on the bottom
It
half.
is called a market.
Yeah.
And you can change it to different. Okay.
But to me, you should be checking that every day. That's something I look at to see if I can see trends going on. I like to check it on Thursdays and Fridays the most because I can see how many new listings are coming on. Seeing if we're getting a bump, if we're flat, or if we're falling down.
Yeah.
Can you? Oh, perfect.
Yeah, you can.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get into the different strategies. Okay, here's one, writing over list price, right? So make the offer stand out in multiple offer scenarios, shows the seller, the buyer is serious. Now, you have to have a conversation with your buyer. Are they able to go over list price? Are they pre-approved? Go over list price. Do not write an offer and submit it with a pre-approval that doesn't show that they can afford that house. Okay? Because if I'm a listing agent, I'm gonna say, hey, Megan, could you get me a new pre-approval? Because this is less than what your buyer is offering.
So you're proving that by showing them the agent. That's all. That's part of your offer package.
Yeah, yeah. So can you see why I'm gonna look at that as a listing agent and I'm gonna be like, and I'm also, don't submit an offer with no pre-approval. And definitely don't make an offer with a buyer who has no pre-approval. Even though that's an option on the contract. As a listing agent, I'd be like, really? We can't take you seriously.
Well, there's the buyer, agent, the buyer says, oh, you know, I can afford 350, you're like, oh, so you write them off, and you've never seen proof from the bank, they can only afford 300, a big difference.
Oh, huge
And you-
difference.
yeah, then you will figure out the fashion because you wrote an offer with no proof that they can pay for it.
I wouldn't, I would tell my,
just do it.
I would tell my seller, I would like to tell the buyer's agent, we will not review and consider this offer until there's a pre-approval letter. I'm not gonna get my seller excited about a high offer and no pre-approval. You just, same with cash offers. What does it say in the contract? How long does a buyer have to show proof of funds?
This is for cash.
Mhm. Haven't heard it yet. That's too long. I'm not gonna go under contract. As a listing agent, I'm not gonna go under contract and say to my seller, we'll see in 5 days if they can afford it. So if I counter back, I would be countering back and saying, we want proof of funds now before we accept an offer.
For the offer. I mean,
So as a buyer's agent, I'm gonna tell, if I have a cash buyer, I'm gonna be proactive and say, we need proof of funds from your financial institution, your banker, whomever, wherever that money, that pool of money is. You're
investments than from them.
exactly, wherever that is, and it's going with the offer. Otherwise, a good, smart listing agent is not going to negotiate with us until they have that. Should they? Would you? I wouldn't.
We just have this conversation with buyer that I'm working with.
Okay.
Because, I mean, his.
Investor,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
And he's a business owner and like his credit score is 850, like I know this, I know Mel showed me. But I'm like, you have to have like your loan in place, even though all the things.
Investors are notorious for not wanting to have that up
Well,
front.
yeah, I get tanked and I'm like, well,
You want,
you need to have a good lender then, that's gonna do like a soft check and not do your credit. And then you just get dinged the one time and you get that purchase, the real.
and know that they have a window that they will not get dinged again, even if they talk to other lenders. So there's a different window when you're shopping for a loan. Different loans have different windows. So, yeah, and that's a common misperception of buyers that's gonna hurt them. Well, no, you're gonna need it. We gotta go there. So here are the potential risks: risk of overpaying and leading to an appraisal gap. Will this property appraise? Remember, what should you be doing? Besides talking to the listing agent, what should you be doing on that property and providing your buyers before they write an offer? CMA. Now, it is up to your buyer whether they pay more than what your CMA shows. But you want to counsel them that, and this is where, remember, what is one of the first things I do when I'm doing a CMA? In a neighborhood, what's one of the very first things I look for? What was the highest priced house in there ever? Because if my buyer's thinking about paying more, I want to know, are you buying now the most expensive house in this neighborhood? I want you to know that and have that knowledge, because with that comes the conversation from me of, are you gonna live in this a long time? Because if you're gonna be in here less than 2 to 4 years, it would not be my counsel to go this high over what anybody else has ever paid in this neighborhood. Ever. There's a high likelihood you might not get it back unless you live there 10, 20 years.
That if you're moving 2 years,
Oh, no,
chances are you're going to
You're-
be back
you're gonna-
at the market level when you go to sell.
or you're gonna take a loss. We don't know. Could cause the buyer's remorse if the house doesn't appraise, meaning, oh, I've got this house. And if they did an appraisal waiver, which is a good strategy, but it's a painful financial strategy, can be. Right? So you've got to be thinking that. And so ensure your buyer understands the market value and sets a personal price. That's why I'm going to be talking to them about financially. When you're talking to a buyer about how much house they can afford, what's the better question? I mean, once they're pre-approved. But
Like your monthly payment, yes.
monthly payment is actually the better conversation. Because somebody can get pre-approved much higher than they're comfortable with a monthly payment. So you should be talking in monthly payments with them. And also writing over list price. Do you think you would put your buyer in a good position if they were, let's say, they were pre-approved for $350? But they didn't have lots of extra cash for any over that scenarios in an offer. Do you think it would be a good strategy to take them shopping and showing them 350 houses in a competitive market?
No, because you're gonna have to go over list price.
You're gonna lose every
You're
time.
gonna lose- Like I'm thinking, oh, you're gonna, depending on the amount, like you might have to go look $75,000 under or what, you know. Because they're going over so high.
This is one of the biggest mistakes of agents, buyers agents, especially new ones, is showing your buyers houses at the top of their budget. And not having this conversation of why we shouldn't be doing that. Unless you have the wherewithal financially and the risk tolerance to do some of the things it would take to win this house.
That's why the buyer's estimated expense worksheet is so helpful, because you fill it out based on that $350,000 maximum they can afford. And that's gonna show you at the bottom, they're gonna need $25,000 cash to actually make this work. If they only have $10,000 cash, you know they cannot afford $350,000.
Yeah.
It gives you some basis to work with too, and then you adjust and tell them, you're like, we're gonna have to have a different strategy, because you're not having enough cash to be competitive in this market, we need a different price point.
Yeah.
And they need to know that.
So if they get like pre-approved for like a bigger amount than what you talked about, they're like, we really want to stay here, even though we can go here. Would you throw in a couple houses that are up there, if you went to, it's like, hey, I know you said these, you want to look at these.
Not until I know their risk tolerance and what they would, their personal price, meaning what are they, I want to have the conversation to win a house. How much could you go over? And what of these different strategies, what risk are you willing to take?
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
so,
like, if you're with a couple and he's the risk taker, but she's not,
Yeah.
like, no, you're on.
yeah, then you've got, that's a hard one too.
Usually are each other.
My husband's the risk taker, he's impulsive, he'll go, yeah, and I'll be like, no.
Yes. That's my husband.
No, put the brakes on that, buddy. So you've got to figure that out and have those conversations. Because this is not the market to take someone out shopping without these conversations. Because you're just gonna set them up for failure, and you're gonna look bad. Agents, it is not uncommon for for a buyer to start doubting their buyer's agent if they write them offer after offer and they lose. Now, reality is sometimes you're gonna have a client that no matter how you've counseled and you've had all these conversations, that they are not going to listen to your counsel. Understand that right now. No matter how persuasive you feel you are, you're going to have clients who do not listen to your counsel. And at the end of the day, unless they want to do something illegal or unethical, you are to fulfill their wishes. And you're going to write offers. Sometimes they'll be like, oh. You better keep that inside, because none of you, and I see this, you should never submit an offer and go, oh, yeah, I told my buyer not to write this offer. Oh, no, it happens all the time. Because how many times have you, just in the short time you've been an agent, heard a listing agent say, oh, my seller, that's not the price, we're overpriced. Should you be saying that? Unless your seller said, oh yeah, you can tell them I've overpriced this house. You are not, you zip your lip. We are not to say that. We can say it to our spouse when we go home. We can say it to our best friend who's not in real estate. We're not to be out, well, we shouldn't, but just do it to your partner, your spouse, your kids. Well, not even your kids, because sometimes they'll blurt it out. Yeah. My mom said that house is overpriced. My mom said her client won't listen to her. Gotta be careful there. Okay, here's another strategy. Mortgage pre-approval from a reputable lender. It's not just a pre-approval letter from anybody. And this is what some of you will learn the hard way. I had to learn the hard way. Not all lenders are created equal. Not all of them will get you to the closing table. Either on time or at all. And you're gonna be like, how can that be? They're a lender. Don't they know what they're doing? Well, there's good and bad. And you want to make certain that it is one of your best practices because you're going to have buyers that are going to come to you already pre-approved. And sometimes that's great. You're saying, this is awesome. But as you start learning about who's a good lender and who's not, and you're probably already starting to hear that, then you should always have a conversation with your buyer. Because I had to do this after a bad experience, and I had to start saying, Megan, you know, it's great that you came to me pre-approved. It means you're trying to do your due diligence and come prepared. I admire that about you. However, there's something I ask of every one of my buyers. And I ask them to get a second opinion. This is if I don't know the lender, or if I know it's like Rocket Mortgage or something that has a really bad track record. Bank of America.
It defied a court order. In my transactions,
Defied a court order.
yes.
Wow.
Never in my.
And the reason I ask all of my buyers to get a second opinion is this. One, I want to make certain that you're getting the best loan product for what you want to achieve. Now, you didn't hear me say the cheapest. Because the cheapest is not always the best. But I want to help them find the best product for them. And two, I want a backup plan. Because Megan, I would love to tell you that every lender, you could pick any lender and they'll get us to the closing table on time, or they'll just get us to the closing table. But that has not been my experience. I want to know that we have a backup plan with another lender. That if for any reason your lender falls apart at the last minute or things fall in the cracks, we have a backup plan, and 10 days out before closing, we could switch and still get to the finish line. Because otherwise you could lose your dream house or get financially penalized by the seller for not closing on time. So there's consequences if we don't close on time. Some of them can be very severe. You think that a seller, if they've been under contract for 45 days with a buyer, and the lender needs to extend because they didn't have their act together, you think most sellers would be okay with that. But if that happens once, that happens twice. Sometimes it happens more than once, the postponement. Because the lender still can't get their act together for whatever reasons. Sometimes they didn't check enough things, and then there's surprises at the end for them. So I always want that backup plan. And I want it with a reputable lender. Because that will make a difference. Because I can honestly say to them as a listing agent, one of the factors that I'm going to say to my seller that we have to consider is who is their lender. And if that lender doesn't have a good track record with offer B, but offer A is very similar and they're with a rock solid lender, I'm going to say to my seller, this is the offer we should go with. They've always gotten to the closing table on time. They bend over backwards. Right?
How do you verify if it's like a reputable or not?
You ask around until you know.
And that right there, local lenders are typically far more preferred because they have an office, you can go talk to them in person.
Yeah.
You know, other people use them, they know them. So
Here's where the difference is. A bank lender, like a bank that has a loan department, is different than a mortgage company, and that's their only thing they do. And you will learn that those like a Bank of America or Rocket Mortgage, Wells Fargo, they work 8 to 5. And they're just paper pushers. Mortgage companies that this is what they do, this is their bread and butter, usually are accessible after hours and on weekends. They know what we do, they understand our world, and they work within the hours we do. That's invaluable. If you can't get hold of a lender easily, that should be a red flag. So I'm always, another way, Amy, is when I get offers, and we'll talk about it more when we switch to the seller section of this class. is I'm gonna be calling the lender of every offer we're seriously considering to have a conversation. Cause that's part of my job. My due diligence as a listing agent is checking out the lender, especially if I don't have a clue about them. Make sense? So some sellers may still prioritize cash buyers. I get it. Pre-approval isn't the same as full underwriting approval. Now, some lenders, especially a couple years ago, had where they would take a buyer through underwriting. And so their pre-approval was actually a loan commitment. Meaning, you understand that when a pre-qual is not next to nothing, right? So don't write offers with pre-qualification letters. Cause that's just like, oh, we talked to him once and
Maybe.
it's we don't know. It's actually, we don't know if we'll give them a loan. A pre-approval is, we think we'll give them a loan. They look pretty good right now on the surface, but we haven't gone deep with them. So there are some lenders who have the ability to take a buyer further down the process. So that's a rock solid pre-approval because they're getting a loan. Unless they do something crazy, because they'll check again to make sure you haven't incurred more debt or bounced checks or done stupid stuff. But they're pretty much saying this is rock solid. So that could be, and that's when we were in the super crazy market, seller's market of everything was getting multiple offers, even junk. Right now, junk is not getting multiple offers unless it's a good investment buy. Okay. Loan type. Loan type, that's what as a listing agent, as a seller, I'm gonna be looking at when we get an offer. So conventional loans are seen as stronger. Did you see my post on that I did about the market stats of houses in certain price points in Johnson County? And did you scroll down and see the different loan types? So on that, if you go to the Facebook page and look for that, what I posted, you'll see where it shows you what are most buyers, how are they purchasing that home? And that's actually another statistic I own of choice for first-time home buyers. Because they had the most favorable things. It's not anymore, and you'll see that the more buyers use a conventional. So the risks on if you have because what happens when they do the appraisal?
There's gonna be, they have more of a fine tooth count.
Like a quasi inspection.
Yeah.
And what are they looking for?
Handrails, solid decks.
Safety.
Safety. That's-
Safety things and conditions. So they're looking at the condition of the house with a fine tooth comb at a higher level than an appraisal on a conventional. Same with VA. And so when they flag anything and put it in their report, it is required to be repaired or replaced prior to closing, or the buyer will not get the loan because they will not insure the loan. So if you're a buyer's agent and you have someone with an FHA, should you be showing them fixer-uppers? No, not unless, now there is an FHA loan for fixing up, but that's a different loan product. So they do have one. It's more involved. But it's a great option, but most first-time buyers, that's not the avenue they can or will go. So, please, 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 I had a new agent, she had a VA buyer. And she kept showing him fixer-uppers and going under contract, and I'm like, why, stop it?
Maybe that's the only thing in their budget.
We can't, they could, he
It just
couldn't,
never,
it couldn't, you never found a seller that would do all of that work. And the buyer couldn't afford to do any of it. So just know that if using, then you need to. You can offer in the contract, there is a paragraph in the contract in which a buyer can say, we will cover up to X amount of dollars that the FHA appraisal needs to be done. The hard thing is how you're gonna know what they're gonna call out and how much it's gonna be. So that paragraph in theory is good, it rarely gets used because you don't know. So what happens if you say, we'll cover $2,500, but the FHA appraisal has more than that, the seller hasn't obligated themselves to cover the rest. So then so just know that in theory, that's a great, but it's rarely used, that paragraph is, but you need to know that. So if I had an FHA buyer, then I've got to, you know what? I don't think anybody's told you all this. Not only do you have to write a strong offer, you have to sell it. One of the things my husband does exceedingly well is selling his buyer to a listing agent with that offer. He'll talk about how strong that buyer is, the great lender they're with. He'll even ask that lender to make a phone call to the listing agent to back him up, to vouch for the strength of that buyer. So when you have an FHA or a VA buyer in a competitive market, you're going to have to really sell them and how much they want this house. One of the things my husband always says is, we want a buyer who wants to get to the finish line. Do they really want the house? Because sometimes you've got buyers making offers because they need a house and they're, but would they easily give up on the house when it comes to inspections? So he has that conversation up front with them is, how much does your buyer want this house? We want somebody who's truly going to get to the finish line. And that's again why he's talking to the lender, the buyer's lender, to make sure they're a good lender that can get to the finish line. Make sense? So you have to sell your offers. That's why with every offer, I'm going to be submitting it. I'm also going to have bullet points of what my offer contains. Because I want to make it so easy for that listing agent that they don't have to page through my offer to know what our offer price is, what our down payment, what our earnest is, what our inspection period is. Are we asking for closing costs? No, I'm putting it right in front of them. Now, you also need to look at the offer if you're the listing agent to make sure those coincide. Sometimes they haven't, so don't assume. Okay. Those of you online, you're really quiet. Any questions so far?
Not anything in particular, but I was wondering, when we were talking about like favorable, like, loans, what looks good and better, anything in particular that attracts like new, like builders or new builds?
New builds are going to be conventional.
Okay.
Almost, I mean, it could be a jumbo loan if it's over a certain amount with new construction. But usually it's going to be a conventional unless it's, I think it's what, 700,000 or 800,000 over for a jumbo loan.
Okay.
That's where you probably see that happening, but that's a good question. Good question. Okay. Personal letter to the sellers. Okay, I put this in here. Because you're gonna hear about it. And if you choose to do this with your buyers, you have to be exceedingly careful. Exceedingly. So it can create an emotional connection. It can work. It must comply with fair housing laws. How do you think it can be dangerous?
Personal information, why your buyer.
Such as?
I mean, I think even some places, you can make it ding for talking about like children in the school district.
If you say like it's close to.
No, that's
or-
fair housing.
Anything.
Personal.
Personal involved.
Mhm.
You have absolutely no details.
Well, it just has to focus on how much they love the house, that kitchen and what you did to it.
So this is, I don't know if it's off topic, we can take it offline, but I saw on social media, somebody posted, if I was moving to Kansas City, these are the areas I would live. Is that against fair housing? They were all like high-rank places.
Well,
Or would that be more steering?
that's more steering.
Okay.
If an agent said, these are the only places, only areas you should live in.
But are they basing it off of like data?
Doesn't matter. We don't know, that's the problem.
Yeah.
But
We don't
couldn't
know.
they have like, to make it different, like, hey, if you're living in Lee Summit or looking to move, here are some really good spots. They could do something like that, right?
Focus on the price
Okay.
of the area, the amenities of the area, and if I see, oh, please, no walk. When you are promoting a house, you have a listing or an open house or what have you, please don't use anything having to do with walking. It's in walking distance of a school or a shopping center. We can't say, because not everybody can walk.
So like just a stone's throw.
Yeah,
just
close
catty corner.
close
Nearby.
to, nearby. It's just nothing that takes 2 legs, okay? We're not talking walking.
Just explain this to my daughter. We like drove past one in our neighborhood that said that, and I was like,
Many people, many agents don't remember they're not supposed to, or they haven't
Oh.
taken the fair housing class recently.
Or they didn't really pay
Or didn't
attention.
really pay attention.
So when you say like close to such and such elementary school.
You shouldn't be. Schools and especially churches, you shouldn't.
Because everyone's good school district is different. So
Mhm.
like, I say, oh, this is a great school district. That doesn't matter, it's a personal opinion.
Yeah,
So-
it's personal choice, because what you want for your kids could be different than what I want for my kids. So we have,
But even if I'm not saying like, oh, this is a great school, like if I'm listing a house.
I wouldn't.
No.
And it's like across the street from the school, you still
No.
can't.
but they're fine.
They'll figure it out, just like how they're homework.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would look for shopping.
Danielle.
I would steer away from that because a lot of the open houses that I've hosted, I've had like buyers come in that have kids and they're like, tell me about the school district. Is it a good one? And when you steer them away, it almost makes me feel like I'm coming across as uneducated rather than
Yeah.
it being a legal issue. And I also don't really like legal them, like, I'm getting in trouble with the law.
Okay.
We had.
No, no.
Like,
Yes.
people were talking to us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so here's what I would say. I know this is gonna sound like counterintuitive to what I do. But because of fair housing laws, there's some things I can't say or can't advise on. I wouldn't say can't say. I can't talk about the quality of schools. And then I would add what Tatum said, because every parent's criteria of what's important to them and what makes a good school is different. I cannot talk about the crime in a neighborhood because everybody has a different perception of what is safe. And there's crime everywhere. It doesn't matter where you live. So that's what I would say. I know this sounds strange, but those are things I can't share with you, but I can give you. So then you all need to know good websites in which, hey, can I text you these websites that will give you what the differences are, so you can figure out, is this the type of school district or school I want to send my kids to? So that's a perfect way for you to add value and give them information. If they're worried about the crime and say, hey, I heard that this restaurant up the street just got broken into. Is it safe around here? Then, hey, you know what, again, I know this sounds a little strange, but that's something I can't, that's subjective. I cannot, and fair housing says I'm not to. However, I can give you resources so you can look and see what you think. Does this feel safe to you? Because what I feel safe with and what you feel safe with are two things. Does that help? Because it is one of the most, that's why in a buyer's consultation, I'm saying that up front so that they won't think that I'm holding back on them and they won't continue to pump me. Because if you watch that one of those fair housing videos, the workarounds don't work for an agent. Well, they'll ask you, so, but would you move here and put your kids in this school?
I would go to these educational sites and do my own due diligence. That's what I would
Okay,
say.
see how Tatum, very good. She's got it.
Would educate myself.
I need to educate myself because I don't know if this be the right schools for my kid. Because my kid loves to dance, or my kid is artsy, or my kid has a learning disability, or my kid, whatever. I'm gonna make sure it's right for me and my children. So, yeah,
Parents are good about that in this, I feel like in this area, you kind of, people do their homework.
they'll still pump you. They will still pump you. I encountered it.
Oh, and it's so hard with people like us. I've lived here my whole life.
Right.
I've been, PTA member of Shiner School District 15 years. I can tell you the inside and outside of Shiner School District.
Yeah.
But that's not my place.
Right.
Because they may prefer a different environment for their family.
But would it be fair to say like all of the schools there are great, you just need to
No.
find your right fit?
No,
No.
don't say
Okay.
good, bad,
None of
great,
those words.
none.
Don't talk subjectively about the school districts,
Yeah.
period, just give them educational sites, like,
Yeah.
just refer to them.
Yeah, but I love what Tatum has awesome scripts right there. I would, if I was a parent, I'd be checking it out myself. Would you like those sites in which you can do that? Because that's what I would do as a parent, right? See why this gets tricky and why if you do that personal letter, also know this. If I was going to, if my buyer really wanted to submit a letter saying how much, matter of fact, when my husband helped, his son and daughter-in-law buy a home, they wrote a personal letter, but they talked about the house. And the sellers loved, because these sellers took care of this house meticulously, has white carpet. Nothing, there was no wear and tear on anything, no kids, no pets, no smokers, no nothing. I don't think any shoes were ever worn in that house. That's how perfect this house was. And when they shared how incredibly well this was taken care of, those sellers loved it. However, you also need to ask the listing agent, would your seller be open to a letter from my buyer? Because some listing agents, and I get it, are saying, because of fair housing, you should not be looking at any buyer letters.
It is in our current exclusive right to list contract. Line 41 and 40, you can counsel the seller on, you want to accept buyer letters. I always recommend my seller, no, we don't. It's just, there's too much possibility of violating fair housing rules by receipt.
Oh, there for a while, people were putting pictures of their buyers. And as a broker, guess what? Or as a brokerage, guess what we got a complaint about? A buyer saying, we know our offer was declined because we're a mixed family. It wasn't, but that's their perception of what happened, because their offer wasn't accepted because they were a mixed family.
It's not a best practice, yeah.
It's not about, but I bring this up because you're gonna hear about it. And I want you to know what the dangers are if you do decide to go down this path. And know that some listing agents are gonna say, no, my seller's not, that we will not be looking at them even if you submit them. Because they have decided not to do that.
The things that people want to share in these letters are the things you shouldn't be sharing in these letters.
Usually. If you can't just talk about the house, not how I'm gonna bring up my kids in this house,
The
that,
question that you made, it's amazing. You know, we just shared one with like this really cool, so. I don't remember to talk about that,
so
not in the
risk,
kids in there.
risk. Seller's preferred closing date. This is such an easy one. Remember, you're gonna talk to the listing agent before you sit down to write an offer. Cause here's the other thing that can happen. It happened to me. I was new. I was naive. We went to go see that house 3 times. So if that didn't say my buyers were really interested to that listing agent, I don't know what would have. We sat down and because this was like one of the, maybe my second or third offer I ever wrote. It was for buyers who wanted to live in a specific subdivision that was very small. So houses didn't come up very often. We decided to write an offer and I was of the ignorant mindset that I shouldn't show my cards to the listing agent that we're gonna write an offer. Remember, I didn't have a mentor. I had this much training. I was just going on, seat of my pants everywhere. And I still had that adversarial mindset kind of going on of, oh no, we shouldn't show our cards. So I didn't call the listing agent. We write the offer, we submit it, and she says, oh, we just negotiated and went under contract. My buyer said, how did you not know that? Why did we do that? And we're firing you. Remember what I said? This was a small subdivision, houses rarely came up. And I lost them their chance in their eyes. Because I didn't know what was going on. That was kicking my butt.
Thanks for sharing your tips.
My war wounds. Want to see this one? I'll share my war wounds. So, you can do things like offer if you can't. Now, it just depends on your buyer's ability. Maybe the seller wants extra time to stay in the house before they move out. So maybe you could do a lease back option that gives the seller flexibility. But asking what is your seller's preferred closing and possession date is one of the easiest things you can ask of a listing agent that is not going to put their sellers at any disadvantage. So it's one of the easiest things. And here's the way I look at it. If my buyers can meet that, then I know we have at least one winning item in that offer. I know that. We've got one in the go column, right? So I know we've got one thing they like for sure. And I'm also asking the listing agent, what's important to your seller in an offer? And they can share. Some will overshare. They will. Take notes, because there are listing agents that will tell you so much more than they should ever share with you, but that's to your advantage. You're not to say to them, stop, you shouldn't say that. But they will. Now, if I hear you all saying that, don't be offended if I say, don't say that. Don't tell me don't tell me the terms, don't share that. Because you'll think, oh, Krista, she's just so strict. Well, no, there's a reason. So if I say that, if I hear it coming out of your mouth and I'm like, oh, you know, oh, there's a reason. I'm trying to protect you. It doesn't always work. Sometimes your buyers can't meet those timelines. But that can be an easy win. High earnest money deposit. Why it works, it shows strong commitment. We're gonna come in strong, then what do you think is best practice of the minimum for an earnest? What percent of the sales price? At least 1%. There for a while, especially when I was a new agent, $500 like on every offer, regardless of the price of the home. Well, that's no risk. That's no risk. Now, if you really want to get competitive, you could say to your buyer, would you be comfortable with a non-refundable earnest like they do in new construction? Okay, that takes a client that has a high risk tolerance. So what if we did $5,000 non-refundable of our earnest? See how you can take this and make it even a plus the strategy? But there's risk to it, right? And also, please don't ever say, and if you don't understand this, you've got to understand this. In the contract, if the buyer cancels due to one of their contingencies, are they guaranteed to get their earnest back? No. Now, they may have very good legal footing to go to like small claims court and get it back because they canceled due to a contingency in the contract. But when a contract is canceled, there is a cancellation notice that goes out to the other side saying we're canceling the contract and here's how the earnest is to be released. Either all of it back to the buyer, or maybe they're gonna negotiate, the buyer gets to keep half and the seller gets to keep half for the inconvenience of being off the market during that time. Or the seller might say, I'm not gonna sign this. That doesn't mean the seller gets to keep the money, it just means the money goes in limbo. And you should have learned in license law that there are different funds in Kansas and Missouri that if it is not claimed within a certain point in time, then the title company has to send it to the state. So that means that legal action might need to be taken to get that money back. And that's not a conversation you're really dying to have with your buyer, right? So that's why they need to understand this is a legal transaction. And so here are some of the things that won't feel fair to you as an agent or your clients. Things will happen in the transaction that the contract says, no, they can't do that. Well, there isn't a contract police that come out and say, you have to do that. It just means it gave the other party legal rights to go to court based on what was not done correctly or what someone did that wasn't in the terms of the contract. Does that make sense? Like if they default or something like that? It just gives them a legal avenue to be able to object. I'm trying to figure out the right word, to be able to fight that. So they've got the protection, but they don't necessarily have it immediately. You know, like broker to broker can talk. But that doesn't mean that the party like the seller is gonna say, oh, until they're forced legally to do it. Does that make sense? That doesn't happen very often, but just know that can happen. Especially if any bad blood has occurred in the transaction between the parties. That's why you don't ever want to talk badly about the other side, the other agent, the other client. You do not want to demonize anybody because then that emotion just starts percolating. So you want to make sure that your buyers fully understand what happens if for any reason, yes, you have the legal right to cancel during inspections. However, if we do, then the seller has to agree to the release of the earnest. And 9 times out of 10, they do. However, in the rare case that they don't, then you would have the right to go to, and usually the earnest is an amount, and every jurisdiction is different about what their maximum amount is for small claims court. I don't even know what it is anymore, like
It's
it's,
25.
oh, wow. Yeah, it used to be just like 5,000. So most likely they just go and then they would show that they fulfilled the rights of the contract and the other party didn't, and then the judge decides, paid them.
And so to figure out the method of, for these, for like the earnest money deposit that's in the contract, say that at the time. Okay, so it's like, we'll have this conversation on how this is gonna go, if it did happen, it's happening, and so,
Then when we send over that cancellation,
I think this is what.
could happen. Most likely, they're gonna release that earnest right back to you. However, and sometimes it's because it's gone on so long, they've been under contract with you so long. And they've taken maybe some actions to do repairs and other things like that. That they feel like they wouldn't have done those repairs, like say if it doesn't, the appraisal. Or they have a financing contingency that they can't get financing. Then the seller's really pissed, usually, if they've done anything that has cost them money that they were doing because of this specific buyer.
So I think it's it's like actually moved here, started installing handrails, and it's never mind, I love this house anymore. They were just, they just handrails.
Then a seller may want to negotiate, I get part or all of this earnest.
So they can like renegotiate even if the contract, it says release earnest money back.
Well, it doesn't, yes, they can. They can. Because who wants to go to small claims court? Who does? Nobody. Very few. High down payment percentage, why it works, demonstrates financial strength. So if I'm a listing agent looking at offers, and I see that we've got 2 offers and they've got the minimal like 3.5 down. But we've got a buyer that's got 20% down with a really good lender. And maybe they're 2,000 less than the highest offer. I'm gonna talk about the financial strength of this buyer with my seller. And why that is of note and worthy of maybe that $2,000 difference. Because they have the financial wherewithal to get to the closing table. Somebody scraping pennies together may not at the end of the day. So I want to make sure that the buyer is not putting themselves in a bad financial place. And also, these are conversations they should be having with their lender too. Right? So a lender should be counseling them also on what kind of down payment that financially would be good for them, but then you're talking about how to use that as a strategy, if you can. And they need a reserve fund, the buyers need a reserve fund for unexpected costs. But think about this. They write an offer, go under contract, pay for inspections, and then decide to cancel. Do they have enough money to go do inspections on another house and maybe even another house? They might go under contract on 3 different houses and pay for an appraisal. Do they have that extra money to do that? If they don't, then we've got to be careful about how they're using their money, right? And again, this should be coinciding with what the lender is talking to them about. That's why I'm talking to the lender too. The minute I get a pre-approval letter from a buyer, if they're pre-approved when they come to me, I'm talking to that lender immediately. Why? I want to smack experienced agents or any agent who waits at the time till the time of writing the offer to reach out to the lender to ask the questions they need to ask to write the offer. And then it's an 8 to 5 lender and it's 7 p.m. and you've got to get the offer in by 8 p.m. You're waiting until then, but you've been showing houses for 3 weeks? Wrong. Buyer Okay, so appraisal contingency waivers. Well, a couple things. One, if they're getting a loan, who's requiring the appraisal?
The bank.
Yep, the lender. So one of the things I don't want you to ever assume, even though most lenders will allow a buyer to pay the gap or part of the gap. Oh, okay, thank you. But I don't want you to ever assume that the lender is okay with the buyer paying any gap between the sales price and the appraisal price. So sales price is here, but appraisal price is here. There's a $10,000 difference. Your buyer decided, yeah, let's do that in our offer. I'll pay that 10,000. The lender says, oh, wait a minute. You're barely putting anything down.
Kristen, can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry.
Yes, no.
I had gotten a phone call, so I don't know if I missed it, but on the previous slide, when we were talking about a bigger down payment, is it a good idea or just an extra icing on the cake if we can also provide the proof of funds with it?
Oh, yeah. So what I talked about earlier is if you have proof of funds instead of a pre-approval,
Uh-huh.
you need to submit the proof of funds with the offer, even though the contract says that a buyer has 5 days to submit proof of funds for a cash buyer. I would not, as a listing agent, be okay with that for my sellers.
But I meant if they're not cash buyers, but let's just say it's $1 million property, they are
Oh.
approved for $1 million, but they are putting in $50,000 in down payment. Is it a good idea
Oh.
to show that they are actually able to, make
Gotcha.
that down payment?
Yes, and for the appraisal contingency, I want to see as a listing agent, they actually have the money to pay the gap.
Got it.
I don't want you saying that you'll pay that gap. I want proof that the buyer they got money to back that up, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes you just have to understand, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it's just a strategy to win. And then they're like, oh, we'll just deal with it when it comes up, if it comes up. Well, we're rolling the dice that it's gonna appraise. And if it doesn't, oh, sorry, we said we would, but we really don't have that much money to pay that much of a gap. That's why you should cap the gap. Because you don't know what that difference is gonna be between the sale price and the appraisal, okay? And so if you say, yeah, my buyers will pay the gap no matter what, you should cap it to a dollar amount. They'll cover $5,000 of the gap. They'll cover $10,000 of the gap. Not the whole gap when we don't even know what the whole gap is. So remember, you've got to reduce the risk for your buyer. Yeah, instead of waiving fully, use the appraisal gap clause. So cap it. Make sense? But again, to Amber's point, even though she was asking about the down payment, it also applies to this. I would want to see proof. But for the down payment, Amber, I really wouldn't, because the lender has already looked at this.
Got
And
it.
unless it looks crazy to me, and that's where I'm calling the lender as a listing agent saying, hey, looks like they're putting 50% down and getting a loan just for 50%. Is that right? Or do they have the wherewithal to do that? So I'm confirming that.
Right.
But I wouldn't necessarily in that scenario with down payment ask for additional financial documents. I will for this, the appraisal contingency. Next. Cash offers, why it works, no lender delays, fast close, buyer loses liquidity, if they're okay with that. And sometimes to compete, a bridge loan. What's a bridge loan? Anybody know what a bridge loan is? What's a bridge loan? Or not?
It's like a whole other loan.
It's a loan to remove
We were just thinking about this.
to bridge the gap between selling and buying, so it looks like a cash offer even though it's.
Exactly. So
And so you can end up having 3 loans, like the loan.
two loans.
It's a short loan.
Yeah.
It's a short loan. So when I said, remember at the beginning of class, I said I owned 2 homes at one time?
Yeah.
Okay, so found my dream home, or my dream home went on the market. It's a home I actually went past every time I went to my parents'. And I think, I love that home. I love that house. And I see a sign in the yard. And we had been talking about moving and getting some acreage, but we weren't there yet. But then my dream home, or what I think is my dream home, gets a sign in the yard. As we're going to my parents', I'm like, we gotta see that house. I walk in the house and I think to myself, this is before I'm in real estate, I have to have this home. And we get in the car, my husband at the time, it was my ex-husband, he goes, yeah, we can go see some other houses like this. I said, no. This is the house.
Dream of this.
No, this is the house. I didn't say anything in front of the agent because it was just the listing agent. I wasn't in real estate, didn't know how this went. We called just the listing agent to go see that house. Okay? And I'm like, no. So I go to my parents, we write it, I have to go to a lender and say, I say to them, will they take a contingent offer? And they're like, nope. But this is my house. So I talked to the lender and they said, well, you can get a bridge loan. This will give you a loan to buy this house with no contingency.
So you can sell yours.
So you can sell yours. I'm like, okay. And we have to put my house on the market in 10 days. So I say to my parents, because they live just down the street, I said, you want us to live close by? You want that grandbaby? Dad, you gotta come over and help. Yep. Yeah. We gotta paint, we gotta do this. I had the list and in 10 days, boom, we did it. But I owned 2 houses for 2 months. Not fun, and during an ice storm where there was damage and stuff to the house under
Once you
contract.
sell the other home, your bridge loan gets paid off,
Yeah, but
so to speak.
I still get so confused. What is the difference between that and a recast?
They're very similar. And I don't know lending wise what makes the difference or it's the same thing, but so yes, a recasting of a loan can have the same effect that you can go buy without a contingency. So if I have a seller who wants to buy and they want to go shopping before their house is on the market or under contract, then I'm gonna say, we need to look at all the different strategies, and I want you to talk to your lender about a bridge loan. Because we may or may not be accepted as a contingent buyer. And we can go and do that, but I want you to know, do you have any options? Because that may be the avenue you have to go to get a house and to be competitive. And have a seller look at you twice instead of a contingent buyer. Don't want it. This is something not a little novel, paying the seller's closing costs. Not the seller paying the buyer's closing costs, you paying the seller's closing costs. Now, usually it's pretty minimal for a seller. But again, could you sweeten it? Does that look nicer to the seller? Does it give them a little bit more money in their pocket, in their net proceeds? And maybe you would use something like this with a buyer who doesn't have a lot of financial cushion. It's just a little something we're offering that makes you a little different.
Can I still be rolled into the buyer's?
I don't know, and that would be a question for a lender, because I think it would depend on the loan product, and it might not be allowed at all. But great question. So it's a higher cost that's using that net sheet. That's why estimated buyers worksheets, expense worksheets are critical. You should have done one before you ever took them out shopping, so they could see potential costs. Make sure they have the financial, the money set aside to be able to do that. And that they know what when they write that offer, you are to do a net sheet when for a buyer? When is it legally required of you as an agent? That you do the buyer's estimated expense worksheet? When is it legally required of you as an agent?
With the offer or with?
Every time you write an offer. Every time you write an offer. Because without it, you don't have proof that the buyer really knows what it would cost them to buy this home at these terms. Bless you, saw that coming on.
And that's something that we would have to do a check.
Yeah, and when the state comes and audits us, that's the number one issue that agents don't do, they do it after the fact. After the offer's been accepted, guess what? When you do it through .loop, it's time stamped. So it's not hard for the real estate commission inspectors to 1 + 1 didn't equal 2. This was one date and this was another date. What are we doing?
And they all have that.
Okay.
But yeah, and I was like, what?
Yeah, don't think they're not looking. And it is like the number one audit issue. And when we get audited, they have no hesitation of finding us as a brokerage and you. So you rarely get in trouble alone. We're like right there with you. And if you get in trouble a lot, you're a liability. And that's why if it feels like overkill, if it feels controlling, that we require you to learn contracts, to do the contracts exam, to attend the contracts classes. If it feels overbearing that Linda has to look at everything, that's why those audits. Because we're protecting you and us and your clients. No home sale contingency. Not making this purchase contingent on the sale of my home. Now, just know there's 2 scenarios there. One of the scenarios is my house is not even under contract. So there's a kick out clause there that the seller could kick you out within a certain window of time. There's a default time now. But if a buyer without a contingency comes in and you can't remove your contingency, like with a bridge loan or showing that you have the financial wherewithal, you have to prove that you can remove that contingency of selling your house to buy. And it's the lender who says that in the pre-approval letter. It's not the buyer saying, oh yeah, I can buy. I'm going to sell my house. No, if they have a pre-approval letter, it's the lender who makes that determination, not the buyer. Make sense? So buyers might struggle to sell quickly. The bridge loans can help to avoid this. If I'm a listing agent and that house isn't even on the market, okay, so for me, I was thinking about buying another house. And I was going to be a contingent buyer. It was a buyer's market, so I could do that. I was going to downsize. It was just my kid and I. It was after my divorce. And I was like, I probably need to downsize and go to something smaller, more acreage.
You sell
The dream.
Oh, no, this was another dream home. This was a
Okay.
really cool old house with more acreage.
always another
But-
dream.
Yeah,
Choose over the.
yeah. I mean, I can find a new dream home usually. And this had more acreage by a couple more acres. Went on contingent. My house was not even under contract. Again, but I knew the market. These houses were staying on the market. And the listing agent had to come see my house to see how sellable it was.
Interesting idea.
Why not? Yeah, why not? I want to see, could they sell this quickly if we accept this? Right? I thought that was, hey, taught me something. I'm like, yeah, I would do that too. All day long. Okay. As is addendum, I know we're over time. Seller avoids repairs, buyer takes on all of the issues. Pro tip is, whoa. Pro tip is do a pre-inspection to assess risks before making the offer. Some inspectors will go on a showing and do a walkthrough kind of inspection. It's not thorough, but it's better than nothing. So again, if you do not understand the as-is addendum, you need to be looking at it and grasping what the options are. Because the buyer is taking all the risk. So if there's a way to get some feedback on the condition on the house, very important. Escalatory addendum. This can come back. This is another thing that I would always ask the listing agent, is the seller open to this? Because there's either they're fine with it or absolutely not. Because usually think of it, it's the psychology of a buyer saying, well, I'm gonna offer this much and see if I can buy it, but I would pay more if I had competition. And they're like, well, why don't you come in as a real, legit, serious, be a serious buyer? Why are you playing with me down here? It can be insulting to a seller. And some listing agents don't like it, just don't like it. So, when explaining this, because when these first came on the market, this isn't something that's been around forever. It hasn't. It wasn't a thing when I was a new agent at all. Didn't exist. There was none of that. Buyers felt that it was a guaranteed win if we did this, and so did buyers agents. And they had to learn the hard way. No, it wasn't always what the seller wanted, or was, sometimes you insulted them with that lower offer. Oh, you want to steal my house if you can? But if you had competition, you would pay me. So it can come back to burn you. So I would always, because it can insure, but not insure. And then you have to decide how much over the don't put like $200 over the highest. It's usually 1,000. I see sometimes 500. And I think that's kind of insulting too. Yeah. Don't be the eBay buyer. Don't be the eBay buyer. So, yeah, so be careful. Ask the listing agent prior if they would entertain. Don't assume. Again, you got to understand these strategies and how they may be received. Ethical considerations and fair housing compliance, why ethics matters. Offers must be fair and legally compliant. Can't offer firstborn. There for a while, when it was the craziest market ever, I remember some buyer's agents putting in that the buyer would give the seller a case of their favorite bourbon. Yeah. Oh, crazy stuff was going in offers. Only my firstborn after the seller. Oh, you think I'm kidding? I'll give my dog. Well, yeah, not your little sweetie. Remember those buyer's letters? Probably you shouldn't do them. But I introduced them to you because I'm a realist. I want you to know, I don't want to avoid topics. I want you to know what the true risk is. Ensure buyers fully understand the financial risks of waiving any contingencies. Remember, you're taking people through a legal transaction. And you are dealing with and filling out legal documents. So there's high risk at all times. Okay, I'm going to post the fair housing quiz. Matter of fact, I think it's already posted on the Facebook for this. So do the fair housing quiz online, just like you did the other one. And here's your homework. I want you to just do an outline of an offer. So find a house in MLS. I just want, I'm not asking you to write an offer. We're asking to do an outline of, to win this house, pretend as it's competitive offer. And what are the, and I would say 3 to 5 strategies. that you would offer to make it competitive? And I'm gonna post this on Facebook so you can just do your answers in the comments. Because I think it's better. I think it's better if everybody gets to see it and participate. So the quiz is already posted, I think, or will be posted in a couple of minutes. So answer the quiz of the questions. What'd you think of it? Did you learn something?
Oh, yeah.
Was this helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
So
So
you gonna, do you record this so we could like?
it's gonna be on this, these classes, I have Billy putting a new section in so that these will be all uploaded, and then I have created student manuals on these too, or I'm in the process of doing student manuals, so those will also be uploaded in there. Just so that you all know, as we wrap up, unless anybody has any questions. Anybody have any questions?
Here's the question. So on a listing of MLS, wouldn't there typically always be a seller's disclosure? Is there a reason that they wouldn't do that?
No, there's not always a seller's disclosure. Couple reasons. One, listing agent didn't do it. Two, they couldn't get the seller to fill it out fast enough before they put it on, which you should never put something on without. Don't go, oh, excuse my language, no, I'm just gonna say, don't go halfway. Don't put a listing up live on MLS that's half-baked.
No.
But it happens all the time.
Yes.
I was gonna say, when I had my buyer that was under 120. It's not something. But none of those houses had a seller's disclosure, which is really risky for them already being at 120. And it was just really hard, or they would upload the seller's disclosure. But it would be blank and like march through it all, and you're like, there's another document that says we're not providing. a seller's
No.
disclosure, correct?
No, there's not another document. No, you would say in the contract, I mean, so sometimes. However, if you read the seller's disclosure, it says non-occupancy does not release a seller from filling these out. So if it was a rental property and they never lived in it, you cannot tell me that they don't know anything that ever happened to that, because sometimes a tenant's gonna say, oh, we had plumbing issues with, they had to call the landlord and have it fixed. So the seller is to tell everything they know, even if they have not occupied. But it still goes on that listing agents do not understand that, because they probably haven't read the verbiage on the seller's disclosure. But a seller disclosing is a federal consumer protection law. Whether it is in the seller's disclosure format that we've put together or not, they can say there is no seller's disclosure, but that does not release the seller from disclosing what they know. Does that make sense? Now, a foreclosure, a bank knows nothing, probably knows nothing about that house. So that they will have one that's crossed out, but remember, if somebody's flipped a home, oh my God, you know the house better than the previous owners probably did, because you got into the guts of it, most likely. You touched plumbing, you touched electrical, don't tell me you don't, give me a list of everything that you did. So as a listing agent, don't allow your sellers to do that, because they're at risk of legal consequences after that closes and somebody moves in and something wasn't disclosed and found. That's not a place, after closing doesn't mean there can't be something happens. Nightmares usually happen after closing.
To answer Ashley's question, it's best practice to always have your seller's disclosure uploaded in MLS before you go.
I've noticed sometimes, like the agent goes extra mile, and they have like offer information, you know, but then also like within that, some people are really detailed, like I was noticing. The Chad Taylor team answers most of those questions that you would call the agent for, like, what do they want the closing date to? Like, they just give it all out, and I was like, that's brilliant, because then you're not getting bombarded with phone calls, like, from all these agents answering the same 5 questions. It just
Streamline it.
transparent.
On both sides, I want you thinking this, as a listing agent, I want to make it as easy as possible for you as a buyer's agent to make an offer on my home. As a buyer's agent, when I submit an offer, I want to make it as easy as possible on the listing agent to know everything about that offer. And that there be no surprises, and I've got it all up front. And with a bow. That's how you stand out. It's not just the terms, it's because, my last part will be this, is your ability to write and package an offer as an agent is you showing who you are to a listing agent. And if you have put together a sloppy offer, that is a red flag for me as a listing agent, and I will tell my seller, this wasn't complete, I have concerns. If it goes to court, because I was part of a deposition and this is what they were asking me about my agent, is they were sloppy with their paperwork. So did they really know what they were doing? And it cast doubt about how good that agent was and that maybe the buyer's concerns are legitimate. Maybe they weren't informed this, or that. So your sloppy paperwork can come back in all sorts of ways. And you don't want that. So, okay. Was this good? Was this helpful? Okay, okay. Thank you, online Zoomers. Brooke, Whitney, Amber, thank you.
Kristen, I did have a question really quick.
Tyler, yes.
So I don't know if this is the case for everybody else on Zoom, but I really have struggled to hear what anybody that isn't like you or in the front row, what they're saying.
Okay.
Is there a way we can use that mic that they use in the meetings or something?
You know what I'll do is that's harder to use for the Zoom because that goes through the system. But I can repeat what they say and I will
Okay.
make sure that I do that. So thank you for saying that, Whitney. No, that is,
No worries.
we could do that.
Awesome.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for that reminder.
No worries.
With all I hear is just like background noise, you're in a conversation.
Yeah, so thank you for that reminder. That's important. Okay, Zoomers, thank you.
Thank
In
you.
person, thank you.
And last night, Wednesday night warriors, I learned something, Brett, every time I go to one of his tech classes, I learned something I did not know about Dollar Command. That little thing where you can hover over the initials with the little box and copy and paste. He's just a wealth of knowledge.
I know.
It's amazing.